What's up, guys? I wanted to come on and do this video because I got asked this the other day when I did one of those Q&A things for video topics, and this was a good one. I've addressed this before, but my stances have changed a little bit, and I can go a little more in depth on this topic now, just based on some experiences I've had, etc. So the question was, or the topic was, meal plans versus macros, or if it fits your macros approach, flexible dieting, however you want to refer to it. And, when I first got into this industry and first started coaching athletes and clients and, anybody at all and myself, I was very much pro flexible dieting, pro if it fits your macros, or very anti-meal plan. That's changed a good bit since I first started, and I'm glad that it has. Any good coach will adapt, as they gain experience, as their client levels evolve, needs evolve, things like that. So I wanted to come on here and kind of address some things that can be considered when it comes to those two approaches. So I want to address some of the pros and cons to both approaches, when you should use each approach, in my opinion, and some of the experiences I've had and things like that. So some of the pros to a flexible approach, obviously you've got that flexibility. You can eat different foods. You can, enjoy those foods because you're not tired of, the repetitive meal plan that's always the same every day. You're allowed to have that variety, and a lot of people really like that. They like not being stuck to certain foods or limited, on what foods they can eat. And so that's definitely a benefit to that. Another benefit is that you learn, how to eat and how to change your body composition on your own, using different foods, different amounts, adjusting those as your body changes, things like that. So if you're a client of mine and you've, worked with me and used the Macrobased approach, you've probably learned different foods that you like to fit in different situations. You've found tricks to get in your, a lot of times I'll call it macro capping, in this world. So like at night, if you have X number of carbs and X number of fat and so many protein left that you need to eat, a lot of people are will get pretty good at finding foods to fit into those categories to fill in the gaps of what they need for that total in the day. So you do learn a lot as far as like the amounts of different macronutrients in different types of foods and where those can fit throughout your day. So there's a good bit of learning involved. Going back to that flexibility, you can potentially, or almost certainly, depending on how you approach the flexibility, you can have greater micronutrient variety in your diet. And what that means is you're going to get more vitamins, minerals within the foods that you're selecting because you're choosing different foods, depending on how much variation you do have in that day to day. So one benefit for sure is the variety of nutrients that you get from your foods because you're not eating the exact same things every single day. Another benefit to eating a macro-based approach is the convenience. You can stop at a gas station, grab some beef jerky, and a banana and some, protein shake or whatever that you need to do as far as getting in, what you need for that meal or for that day or whatever. So there's the convenience factor. Arguably that's not the best, most healthy approach or the most, the best way to get in your micronutrients. And, we can talk about supplements, as well. If you are eating limited, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, you would need to supplement with some of that. And that's going to be the case for everyone because whether you're on a meal plan or a macro-based plan or a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, especially any of these types of diets that limit or cut out entire food groups, you're going to want to supplement to get in some of those extra micronutrients and to help your health. And so that's one thing about it is convenience. You can grab food on the go. If you I'm going to talk about specific situations for this, but things like, if you're out, if you're at work or something, and for whatever reason you don't have food with you, you know, you can go to Chipotle or Subway and get something that's, relatively lower in fat, going to have a decent amount of protein, not going to be fried or greasy, so it's not going to make you feel sluggish or give you too many calories that way. So there are options for that as far as the convenience factor, if you are in a pinch and need to be able to do that. Or if you just like to be able to do that because at work on Wednesdays, everybody goes out to eat for lunch, and so you need to be able to partake in that just because you're trying to be a part of your work group or whatever. So that does give you that ability to do that. The other thing is, like, if you have an emergency, and this is good for anybody, whether you're on a meal plan or not, or macros or whatever, say you spill some food on the floor. Well, you probably shouldn't eat it off the floor. So what are you going to do? Knowing how to substitute in other foods. So again, like that beef jerky I talked about, say you had a meal that was, really lean ground beef and potatoes, and, you dropped it on the floor. Well, now what? Okay, well, maybe I'll go to the store and get some beef jerky or tuna packets, and rice cakes, or even like a Rice Krispies, if you could, things like that. So it's all going to be, it's going to help you in those emergency situations when you don't have food with you, or something happens to your food, or if your food goes bad, or whatever the case may be. You've got the knowledge to make those substitutions, and you can do that without just having to give up on that meal, or to just not have a meal or whatever. And so those are some of the pros to the macro flexible approach. Now, some of the cons to the macro based approach, you're going to have some randomness in your digestion. So if you have issues with anything, that's bothering your digestion, if you're eating different foods each day, you're not going to be able to pinpoint where those digestive issues are coming from. So hopefully you know what foods do bother your digestion, and you avoid those in general anyway. But if you do have something that you're unaware of and you're eating different foods, then it does take a process to narrow that down and figure out where those issues are coming from. So that can definitely be a problem with the flexible approach. Another one is the sodium intake, and your fluctuations in weight. Not a problem in itself. The only reason that would be a problem is if you are having a hard time gauging your progress, because maybe one day you do have a bunch of beef jerky and tuna packets, and then the next day you just eat some chicken that you made yourself. There are going to be different levels of sodium in those two different days, and so you might hold a little bit more water one day versus the other, which again is fine, unless you need to be able to gauge progress, very specifically, or whatever. So your weight might fluctuate and that kind of thing. Which again, totally fine if your weight fluctuates, but it does need to be taken into consideration if you have certain metrics you're trying to meet weekly, trends that you're trying to see and things like that. So the randomness of your sodium intake can throw off some of the metrics as far as gauging progress, whether that's fat loss or muscle gain or whatever. And then the other thing, we kind of touched on this already, but the food quality. So you need to make sure that if you are taking a macro-based approach, you're choosing, whole foods with lots of nutrients, and, you're avoiding a lot of packaged processed foods. Doesn't mean you should completely, only eat whole foods for every meal all the time and be perfect. That's not, sustainable for most people. And it's just not fun, So if you are, or if you do need to have some of that variety, or you like to have some quote unquote fun foods, things like that, then you can do that with the macro-based approach, but you have to be careful not to do that too much, because you could get some pretty low food quality and a pretty low quality diet overall if you get into the habit of eating a lot of processed packaged foods to fit your macros. So that's a con that can sneak up on you if you do the macro-based approach. And so the opposite is true for meal plans. So as far as the cons for a meal plan is you lack that flexibility, so it can get boring. You're not learning much if you are on a meal plan, because you just eat the same things every day. When your coach makes the adjustment, you just change how much you make of whatever it is, and you go about your day. And that's okay if you don't want to learn anything or don't want to have these skills down the road so that you can, adjust your own diet or coach yourself or whatever, if you're a competitor or not, and you want to be able to do this on your own one day, then the meal plan approach is not going to help you in that way. For some, that's what they want, and that's okay as well. And again, going back to the cons for the meal plan, it's not always convenient. You have to pack your meals every day. You have to have the exact same foods. You have to have the exact same amounts. You just have to make sure you prepare in advance, and that doesn't allow for you to eat out with your coworkers and things like that. And there are times and places where you don't need to do that anyway, and that's okay. And we'll get into that. But the like I said, the con of it is just that you don't have that convenience of just grabbing something and replacing whatever macros in your diet, or filling out those macros for that day with something that's just convenient that you grab or whatever. And so that's a con with that. And again, if you get in an emergency or something, you drop your food, you spill it, something goes bad in the whatever, you don't have the ability or the freedom to substitute something and to make that meal work. So you're just out of luck for that meal. And that rarely happens, but if it does, then, not being able to make some substitutions or know how to do that can be a problem with the meal plan approach. Some of the pros to the meal plan approach, you don't have to think about anything. You just make the meals and you eat them. It takes a lot of stress away, and a lot of people like that. And that's perfectly fine as well. Your digestive issues that you have, if you're eating the same things every day at the same, roughly the same times every day, you're going to be able to pinpoint some of those digestive issues. You're going to be able to fix those much more quickly than if you are on a macro-based approach and you're eating, more randomly. So that's definitely a benefit to the meal plan approach, is that digestion can be controlled and managed much better, and you can troubleshoot your digestion much easier if you're on a meal plan. And then again, the food quality issue, if you are on a meal plan and you're eating only whole foods every single meal, then you're getting what you're getting as far as the vitamins, minerals, things like that. And so that is a benefit to the meal plan approach, is you're getting quality foods versus maybe you stop and get a Twinkie for some carbs and fat or whatever, and then that can work for body composition, but it's not not optimal. It's not going to make you feel the best or perform the best necessarily, depending on other factors. But for the most part, in general, I'm making a general statement here. Whole foods are going to make you feel and perform better, and ultimately lead to better body composition. For the most part, there are times when you need some faster carbs, or you need something that's easy to digest and very, very palatable, tastes really good, so that you can get in more calories and things like that. And so there are situations where junk food may be more appropriate than a whole baked potato or whatever. And I'll get into that a little bit too. So those are the pros and cons to both. So now I'll talk about who should use which approach. So a meal plan approach, in my opinion, I've learned, and I used to not do this. I used to not ever start anybody off on a meal plan. But if I have a brand new, fitness client who's not a bodybuilder, not a competitive bodybuilder, they may not have ever trained. They may have just trained, for a little while, or they may have trained for a long time, but they have no idea what they're doing diet-wise or whatever. I'm going to probably start them on a meal plan. But within that meal plan, there will be listed out macros and calories, because that's just what I do with my spreadsheet, and because it does help them. So somebody that first starting out, meal plan is probably not a bad idea. You give them exactly what to eat, give them exactly the amounts. They can prepare. They don't have to think, and they're probably not going to get tired of or bored with it, because they're probably very motivated to get started with everything, and they want to have the results. And with the meal plan, you might see some quicker results because of a little more specificity to what you're taking in. Another thing I didn't actually mention too, with the flexible approach, there is a little bit of potential for incorrect macros. You could, if you go to a restaurant and you order a steak and potato or whatever, if you put that in MyFitnessPal or whatever app you use, it's not going to be weighed exactly the same in the app as it is on the plate. There is some variance to the meals that the restaurants provide. If I walk into Chipotle and I ask for a bowl or a burrito and ask for double meat, they're going to look at me and be like, oh, this guy probably wants a lot of meat. So they're going to probably be generous with how they scoop it out. And so it's not weighed, so it's not exactly precise. And so, you're potentially going to miss out on some of that with the macro approach, some of that precision with the macro-based approach. And again, I'm going to get into, who and when with all that. But if you need precision and you want, quicker results, then the meal plan approach is probably better in that regard. So first starting out, somebody give them the meal plan. They know exactly what they're eating. It's very precise. The results are going to probably happen quicker than somebody who's on a macro-based plan. One, because they're not having to fight through that learning curve of the macros, and they're going to be more precise with the amounts of calories and macros they're taking in. So I'll start somebody out with the meal plan approach. I will give them the macros and the calories of that plan and allow them to make substitutions as they go, as they learn and get comfortable enough to do that. Now, unless they're a competitor or something, or, first-time competitor or whatever, but I'm probably not going to start somebody off in a prep who doesn't know how to track macros or doesn't have experience with all this anyway, because that's not setting anybody up for success. So first starting out people, those are the people I'm going to start on meal plans typically, unless they just express that they want to learn the macro approach and they like the idea of it or whatever. And then I'll, teach them a little more as far as how that goes. So that's who should use a meal plan there. Competitive bodybuilders, most competitive bodybuilders need to be on a meal plan, at least in prep. And the reason is consistency. As a coach, we can see what's happening more, if somebody's on a meal plan because of those sodium fluctuations I talked about, the fluid retention that's not happening because of the randomness of the sodium intake. And so that's one reason that a bodybuilder should be on a meal plan, is just to be able to gauge progress a little bit more clearly and efficiently. And then also it just, again, with that, the extra calories that you might get from this or that, or, if you go out to eat, or if you have packaged foods, things like that. If you're in a contest prep, it's going to be less precise with, how that's going to change your body because you may be getting extra fats from some of the meals out because of how they cook them or things like that. So a meal plan for a competitive bodybuilder probably makes the most sense. I do have some competitors who are still on a macro-based plan, but it's because I know they know what they're doing and they typically eat the same foods every day anyway. Now that's the caveat to the macro-based approach. I still recommend eating the same foods every day, but when you have the desire to make some of those substitutions, or if you want to change it up, you know how to do that and you can. And so that is where the flexibility comes in. I don't ever encourage anyone to just randomly put in food on the fly throughout the day and then, cap it off at night, unless they've been doing this forever and they know exactly how to do that. I mean, I used to do that, when I was, just years ago when I was using a macro-based approach, and it worked because I wasn't I knew what I was doing and it worked. There were the bad part of that within a contest prep, though, is that you get toward the end of it, and if you have some flexibility within your distribution of macronutrients, or if you have different foods that you're eating, it can mess with your head for one thing, because you will save all your carbs or fat or whatever for this food that you've been craving, and then the rest of the day you're eating very little or just protein all day. And so your energy levels, aren't going to be good for training. Your blood sugar is not going to be stable, so you're not going to feel great. Your progress might not be as good as it could be as far as like muscle retention, or even gaining in a prep if you're on anabolics or something. So the randomness with the food intake with a macro approach in a prep is not good, because as you get hungrier, you're more likely to make bad decisions as far as using up all your calories first meal because you're hungry, or saving all your calories for the last meal, or finding ways to make these fun foods fit, protein pancakes with whatever stuff that you do and all that kind of stuff. That those things can throw off your rest of your day, and it can really make it difficult to adhere to the diet. So even my macro-based clients, I definitely encourage them to stick to the same foods every day, especially at the very end of a prep, because the more thinking you're doing at the end of a prep, the harder it's going to be for you. So that's that. Another group of people that might need to use a meal plan, really high level athletes, as far as Olympics, or even like baseball players, football players. If you know what makes you feel good, what makes you perform well, what digests well, you're probably going to make those choices each game or each practice. If you know that you're going to have lots of energy and you're going to feel really good, you're not going to have gut issues, you're not going to be inflamed from a meal that you have before a game or a practice, you're probably going to have that same meal or before a practice or a game. If you give yourself digestive issues throughout the week, you're not going to practice great, you're not going to sleep great, you're not going to recover well, you might potentially get injured where you wouldn't have before. And so there's some situations, for high level athletes that are not bodybuilders where they, potentially should be on a meal plan as well. The other group of people that I would recommend a meal plan for is anyone who has digestive issues, intolerances, food intolerances, anything like that. You definitely want to avoid foods that bother your system in any way, digestive or otherwise. And being on a specific meal plan, for sure you're not going to accidentally eat something that's going to give you gut issues or anything like that. So it's really important to make sure that you're managing any of those health issues that you might have with your diet, and eating the same foods every day that don't bother you can definitely be the solution for that. Now, a macro-based approach can be appropriate for sure, and I still do use it with some people. And one of those groups of people is off-season bodybuilders. And I do have some off-season bodybuilders on meal plans for sure. That's definitely not, it's not absolute either way. But off-season bodybuilders, there are times when it's hard to eat all the food we're supposed to eat. And, it can be good to give us some variety, some flexibility. Maybe instead of rice one night, you eat some Frosted Flakes or whatever. I'm not saying you should eat Frosted Flakes every day, or that your meal plan should consist of, or, most of your food intake should consist of kids cereal or mac and cheese or whatever. It's not what I'm saying, so don't strawman me. But there are times when you've eaten so much rice, it's coming out of your ears, and so you want something a little different. So maybe you make some pasta, or you whatever that might look like. You might use a protein shake instead of your meat for the night, because you got an early morning the next day and you want to go ahead and get in bed, and it's going to take you a minute to cook your meal. So you just throw you throw a protein shake together, match the macros for your carbs or whatever that might look like. And maybe the sleep is more important than eating exactly the same meal that night in the off season. So situations like that, I would think it would make sense. Again, people who are veterans in this and can do it and not mess it up or not mess with their heads with craving foods and things like that. Typically people who aren't competing but do have, physique goals one way or the other. Flexible dieting is probably the right approach for them as well, because there's just no need to miss out on some variety and enjoyment, if you don't have very, very specific goals. And then one other group, whether they're in contest prep or whether they're not or whatever, healthcare workers, nurses, doctors. You guys know what healthcare workers are. Anybody in the healthcare field, where the demand is very high, your schedule can be hectic. You may not have time to sit down and eat for a while. You may not be able to pack all this food. Those people, potentially could need to be on a flexible plan or approach. Same thing with restaurant workers. The demand is similar, with those two groups, especially if you have like late nights and things like that. So those two groups, I think a macro-based approach can be good, because it is difficult to sit and eat a bunch of chicken and rice behind a bar, when it's 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. on Broadway in Nashville. You're not going to be able to just sit and eat your chicken and rice, right? So maybe you mix up a shake, put some carb powder in it or whatever, and then you've got your meal for that 3 or 4 hour window that you have right there where it's so busy. So things like, and that could be built into a meal plan, but also sometimes the schedules can be a little bit random with healthcare and restaurant workers. So you might have a base meal plan and then, make those substitutions, or you might just, switch it up as you have to within that schedule. So that's kind of my take on the macros versus meal plan approach. definitely changed a good bit since I started. Ultimately, the goal for me is to get my clients to where they want to go. If somebody wants to have, a great relationship with food, they want to have freedom and flexibility and enjoy things and enjoy life and experiences, and they want to have a good physique and a good body to go with it and feel good and be healthy, but they don't have to have 3% body fat, they don't want to get on stage, or whatever like that, then we're going to take a more flexible approach. I'm going to teach them how to arrange their meals, or things like that throughout the day, so that they are able to enjoy things and not have to be so meticulous. However, if I've got somebody that comes to me and says, hey, I want to get to the Olympia one day, I want to be a pro, open bodybuilder, classic, whatever, wellness, whatever it is, then we need to be pretty particular, because you've got some very specific goals. And so it all just depends on the client, what they need, and what they can adhere to, and what's going to give them the best chance to be successful within the goals that they have. So I hope this was informative and not too rambly. If you guys have any thoughts, questions, anything like that, comment below. If you want to hire me to coach you, just reach out to me on Instagram. It's team_chiseled. Or if you want to email me, joshchisholmfitness@gmail.com. I'm definitely taking on clients right now. And I look forward to hearing from anybody interested. And again, if you have questions or anything, just type those in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.